Imagine a king so powerful that no one dared to challenge him. A ruler so feared that entire lands trembled at the mention of his name. But even the mightiest kings have their greatest battles. This is the story of King Esusu, the man who had everything except an heir. Long ago, in a vast and mighty kingdom, there lived a powerful king named Esusu. He was no ordinary king. He was a warrior, a conqueror, a man whose name echoed across the lands. Wherever he went, he left behind a trail of victory and fear. King Esusu fought and conquered all the neighboring kingdoms, making their lands his own. But he was not merciful. The old men and women of the defeated lands were killed, while the young and strong were captured and made slaves. They worked endlessly on his farms, laboring until their last breath. Despite his strength and wealth, King Esusu had a problem. He had no son. He had 7 wives, each more beautiful than the next, but none had given him a male heir. As he grew older, his people became restless. Who will rule when the great Esusu is gone? They whispered among themselves. One day, the elders of the kingdom came to him with a suggestion. "O great King Esusu," they said, bowing deeply, "it is known that the daughters of the Spider clan always bear many children. Marry one of them, and surely you will have a son." King Esusu, always eager for a solution, agreed without hesitation. He sent messengers far and wide to find the most beautiful daughter of the Spider clan, and that was how he met Obiora. The messengers returned with news of a woman so beautiful that even the sun seemed to shine brighter upon her. Her name was Obiora, the daughter of the Spider clan. Her skin glowed like polished ebony, and her eyes sparkled like the stars. The moment King Esusu laid eyes on her, he was spellbound. Without hesitation, he took Obiora as his wife and brought her to his palace. Unlike his other wives, he adored her openly. He showered her with gifts, gold, beads, and the finest cloth. He sent gifts of bushmeat and grains to her family, ensuring they lived in comfort. But the more he loved her, the more the other wives hated her. Jealousy burned within them, and they whispered among themselves, plotting against Obiora. They knew they had to act before she bore the king a son. Little did they know that fate had already set a path for them all. Obiora's beauty and the king's endless love for her became unbearable for the other wives. The head wife, a woman named Anya, could not hide her hatred any longer. She gathered 2 of the other wives in secret. "We must stop her," she hissed. "If she bears the king a son, we will lose everything." "But how?" one of the wives asked, fear in her eyes. Anya's lips curled into a wicked smile. "We will visit the native doctor." That night, under the cover of darkness, the 3 women slipped into the forest, making their way to the feared native doctor, a man whose powers were known across the lands. The doctor listened to their plan, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I can help you," he said finally. "But beware, this magic has consequences." He handed them a small pouch filled with a mysterious powder. "Put this in her bath water. The moment she touches it, she will be cursed with leprosy. But you must never look upon her
or any of her children, or the curse will return to you." With wicked smiles, the women took the powder and made their way back to the palace. They had no idea what fate had in store for them.
The next morning, Obiora's maids prepared her bath. The water was warm, the room filled with the scent of flowers. She smiled as she stepped in, allowing the warmth to wash over her. But the moment her skin touched the water, a terrible itch spread across her body. She gasped. The itch turned into burning. She clawed at her skin, but the more she scratched, the worse it became. And then she saw it. Her skin, once smooth and beautiful, was covered in white patches. She screamed. The maids rushed in, their eyes widening in horror. The news spread like wildfire. The great Obiora, the king's beloved wife, had leprosy. The palace was thrown into chaos. King Esusu ran to her chambers, but when he saw her, his heart broke. He knew the law. No one with leprosy could remain in the kingdom. Tears filled his eyes as he begged the elders, "Let her stay until she gives birth." But the elders shook their heads. It is a taboo. And so the next morning, Obiora was sent away. But before she left, the king placed a special bead in her hand. "Give this to our child," he whispered, "so that I may know him one day." With a heavy heart, Obiora walked into exile. Her unborn child, the only hope she had left. The evil forest was feared by all. It was a place of banishment, filled with eerie silence and whispering winds. No one who entered ever returned. Obiora, now weak and alone, wandered through the forest. Her belly was heavy with child, but her spirit refused to break. She found shelter in a small cave where she lived among wild animals, eating fruits and roots to survive. One evening, as the moon shone brightly, she heard a groan nearby. Following the sound, she found an old woman lying weakly beside a tree. The woman's face was lined with pain. "Help me," she whispered. Despite her own suffering, Obiora carried the woman to her cave. She boiled herbs, treating the woman's wounds with the knowledge passed down from her mother. Days turned into weeks, and the old woman grew strong again. She looked at Obiora with gratitude. "You have a kind heart, child," she said, "and for that, the gods will not forget you." Little did they know, Obiora's child would soon be born, the child who would change everything. One stormy night, the evil forest trembled as thunder roared through the sky. Obiora, in her small cave, groaned in pain. The time had come. The woman she had saved now sat beside her, guiding her through the labor. After hours of struggle, a loud cry filled the cave. A boy had been born. He was strong, his fists clenched as if ready for battle. His eyes, even as a newborn, held the fire of a warrior. Obiora held her son close, tears streaming down her face. "You will be great," she whispered. "You will return home one day." She placed the bead from King Esusu around his tiny neck. The child, her only hope, had arrived. Years passed, and the boy, named Azuka, grew into a strong young man. The evil forest became his training ground. He wrestled with wild animals, climbed the tallest trees, and learned the secrets of the land from the old woman. Despite his humble life, Azuka always felt something inside him, like a voice calling him to something greater. He didn't know why, but he longed to see the world beyond the trees. One day the old woman took his hands and said, "The time will come when you must leave this forest. When that time comes, follow your heart." Little did Azuka know, his time was coming faster than he thought. Back in the kingdom, King Esusu was getting older. His strength was fading, and though he had many warriors, there was no one worthy to take his place. The kingdom's greatest wrestling competition was announced to find the strongest man in the land. The winner would gain the king's favor, perhaps even be chosen as the next ruler. The entire land prepared for the contest, but unknown to them, a boy raised in exile was coming to change everything. One morning, Azuka woke up with a new sense of purpose. "Mother," he said to Obiora, "I must go." Obiora knew this day would come. She gave him the last of their food, embraced him, and whispered, "Follow your path, my son." With nothing but the bead around his neck and the skills he had learned in the forest, Azuka set off toward the village. Azuka reached the village just as the wrestling competition was about to begin. He was amazed by the crowd, the sounds of drums, and the scent of roasting meat filling the air. He had never seen so many people at once. He walked cautiously, keeping his head down, but something inside him told him this was where he belonged. The town crier's voice rang through the village square. "Let the strongest men step forward for the grand wrestling match." Azuka took a deep breath and stepped forward. The warriors, each large and fearsome, laughed when they saw Azuka. "This boy," one scoffed, "he will not last a minute." But when the first match began, the laughter stopped. Azuka moved like a panther, swift and powerful. One by one, he defeated his opponents, shocking the crowd. Whispers spread through the village. "Who is this boy?" The competition continued, but no one could match his strength. At last, only one opponent remained. Azuka faced the final wrestler, a giant of a man known as Okon. Okon had never lost a match. The crowd was silent as the two faced each other. The drum beats started. The match began. Okon charged, but Azuka was quicker. He dodged, countered, and with an astonishing move, lifted Okon off his feet and threw him to the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers. The tournament was over. Azuka had won. The king, watching from his throne, called him forward. "Who are you?" he asked. Azuka stepped closer, the bead around his neck catching the sunlight. King Esusu's eyes widened in shock. He had seen that bead before. As Azuka stepped forward, the entire crowd hushed. King Esusu, seated on his grand throne, watched the young warrior curiously. Something about the boy stirred, a deep feeling inside him. Then, his eyes caught the bead hanging around Azuka's neck. A memory flashed in his mind. The day he he had given that same bead to Obiora before she was cast out. His heart pounded. "Where did you get that bead?" the king demanded, his voice echoing across the square. Azuka, uncertain but unafraid, responded, "It was my mother's." Gasps erupted in the crowd. The king's hands trembled. Could this be his son? The jealous wives sat together, watching in horror as the king examined the bead. Their plan, which had worked for so many years, was beginning to unravel. "He cannot be her son," the head wife whispered, panic creeping into her voice. But the others knew the truth. If Azuka was truly the king's son, then the curse placed upon Obiora would soon return to them. As the king stared at Azuka, a sudden wail echoed from the group of wives. The head wife clutched her arms, her skin bubbling with sores. The others screamed as their bodies, too, were covered in painful blisters. The curse had returned to them. The people gasped. The truth was clear now. These women had been behind Obiora's suffering. The wives fell to their knees before the king, weeping and confessing. They told of the visit to the native doctor, the cursed powder, and their jealousy of Obiora. King Esusu's face darkened. "You betrayed not only my wife, but my kingdom." The elders decided their fate, banishment into the evil forest, where they would suffer the same fate they had wished upon Obiora. The king's heart ached for the wife he had lost. He ordered his guards to go into the evil forest and find her. Azuka, determined to see his mother again, led the way. Deep in the forest, Obiora sat outside her cave, staring at the night sky. She had long given up on returning home. Then, she heard footsteps. When she looked up, she saw the face she had not seen in years. King Esusu. Tears filled her eyes. "Is it truly you?" "My queen," the king whispered. "I have come to take you home." Obiora and Azuka embraced as the kingdom prepared for their return. Obiora entered the village with her son, now recognized as the rightful heir. The people cheered, showering them with gifts and praise. The king declared a feast in their honor. King Esusu, proud but aged, made an announcement before the entire kingdom. "I have found my son. He shall rule after me." Azuka knelt before his father as the crown was placed on his head. The people chanted his name, welcoming their future king. A kingdom reunited is a kingdom reborn. But how will the people honor their new prince and his mother? The village square was alive with music and dance. Drummers pounded their talking drums, and flutes sang through the air. The people of the land gathered to celebrate the return of Obiora and the rise of Azuka, the son of King Esusu. Obiora was dressed in the finest royal garments, adorned with beads and gold. The villagers who had once cast her away now bowed before her, begging for forgiveness. Azuka, now recognized as the prince, stood beside his mother, smiling with pride. The feast lasted for days, and stories of Azuka's strength and Obiora's resilience were told across the kingdom. As the feast continued, King Esusu addressed his people. Today, we have seen how jealousy and wickedness can destroy lives, he said. We will never allow such evil to take root again. He declared a new law. Any person found using dark magic against another out of jealousy would face exile or worse. The people murmured in agreement. No one wanted to see another Obiora suffer. The law was sealed, and peace settled over the land. Though Azuka was strong and wise, the elders of the kingdom believed he needed to prove his ability to lead. They presented him with a challenge. He must settle a great dispute between two powerful families in the land. For days, Azuka listened to both sides. With patience and wisdom, he made a fair ruling that pleased everyone. The elders nodded approvingly. Azuka had the heart of a true king. King Esusu had ruled for many years, but he knew his time was coming to an end. He called Azuka and Obiora to his chambers. "My son, I have no regret," the king said. "I have fought, conquered, and ruled. But now, my greatest victory is seeing you take my place." With his family by his side, King Esusu breathed his last breath, passing peacefully into the realm of the ancestors. The entire kingdom mourned. Great warriors from distant lands came to pay their respects. The burial rites lasted 7 days, with traditional chants and sacred dances performed in his honor. Azuka led the final ceremony, vowing to uphold his father's legacy. The kingdom bid farewell to the great King Esusu. The King Azuka wasted no time. He improved trade, strengthened the army, and made sure the people had enough food. His wisdom and fairness won the hearts of all, and soon the kingdom became richer and stronger than ever before. One day, a visitor arrived at the palace. It was the old woman from the evil forest, the one who had helped Obiora and raised Azuka. Obiora ran to her and embraced her warmly. The old woman smiled. "I knew you would be great," she told Azuka. "The gods have blessed you." She was honored as a hero and given a place of respect in the palace. Under King Azuka's rule, the kingdom flourished. Trade with neighboring lands increased. Peace treaties were formed, and the people lived without fear. For years, Azuka ruled with wisdom and strength, just as his father had hoped. Years later, when Azuka grew old, he gathered his children and the elders of the land. The story of King Esusu, Queen Obiora, and the trials we faced must never be forgotten, he said. Tell it to your children so they may know where they come from. And so, the legend of King Esusu, Obiora, and King Azuka lived on for generations. Subscribe to this channel for more African tales. Like, share, and drop your comments.